Hello, happy Wednesday. Ezra is not down for a nap yet. My day is starting a little bit later, but I figured I'm just going to risk it and I'm going to get on here and get book study done so I can lay him down and then do school with the girls. So this week we are on chapter 12 and 13 of the Worthy Book Study. It's this one by Jamir Kern Lima. So we're halfway through now at this point. There's about 24 chapters in this book, and we're on chapter 12 and 13. So we're halfway there. This week is a little lengthy, I'm not going to lie. I have like 6 pages of notes, so I'm going to try and get through as quickly as possible. There will probably be interruptions because, like I said, Ezra's not napping yet, and he tends to like to run in here and watch what I'm doing. So that's okay. We'll work it through it. But we're going to start in chapter 12. So chapter 12, the title of that chapter is The Lie, If I'm Me, I Won't Be Loved. So it starts with the author opening the chapter talking about how her mentor is actually Oprah. So when she was growing up, she said that she used to pretty much babysit herself. She would turn Oprah on the TV and she would just watch along, and she always idolized her. And like dreamed of meeting her one day, having her as a mentor. And at one point in her life, she actually got to meet with her, and then they had coffee together, and they kind of became acquaintances and then friends. And so as she grew her business, she kind of leaned more on Oprah for guidance and all of that. And it was Oprah's birthday, and so she picks up her phone, she records a voice message, and she sings like really off key, loud, obnoxious, happy birthday to Oprah, sends the voice message, and her husband looks at her and goes, "Did you really just do that?" And she was like, "Yeah, I did." It was like a family tradition of theirs. When anyone had a birthday, that's what they did. They would just sing super loud, off key, really fun. And so she's like, it's something as I got older and moved out of my parents' house and grew up, I would just keep doing that. And I would just, anyone that I loved, anyone that was special to me, I would do something like this for them for their birthday, whether in person, over the phone, whatever. And so she gives that illustration, and she talks about how she started to like question, like, was this actually okay to do? Like, should I have not sent that? Should I text her back and be like, don't listen to that voice message, just erase it? And she started questioning and doubting her true self. And she ended up telling her husband, if I'm going to continue building an authentic friendship, I have to show up as the real me. So she says it's easy to fall into the trap of fearing that people won't love us if we reveal who we truly are. And on page 162, she says research shows inauthentic behaviors develop in childhood when we learn to disregard our own wants and needs and become devoted to meeting the expectations and needs of others in order to gain the feeling of belonging. But she says when we learn to hide the parts of us that don't earn praise and turn the power to the ones that do. So she's basically saying, like, if you do something silly and goofy, like sending Oprah voice message really off key, and then you start doubting and questioning, then you're actually like hiding who you truly are. And she said if you really want to gain approval from people, if you really want to find your close-knit circle of friends, you actually have to embrace your true self and show up as who you truly are. And so she says on page 164, when you show up in a relationship presenting a constructed version of yourself or something that you just piece together depending on who you are, kind of like camouflaging, she says the relationship will almost always lack the depth of authentic emotional connection and will feel unfulfilling and like something is missing. Feeling true love can't be achieved by changing who you are. And so I think that's so important because I think a lot of times, like I last week gave an illustration of like when I was in middle school and how like I thought that the idea of like dressing a certain way or wearing makeup or being on, the cheer team or the volleyball team, whatever it was, that I would gain like approval in that, and I would get like the cool friends because I was part of these groups, when really that's not it at all. You don't just automatically gain friends because you're in a club or in a group or whatever it is. You actually gain friends because of the close connections that you have with them. And so throughout the next couple of pages, she shares a story from when she went on a hiking trip for a week, kind of just to clear her mind and get exercise and really like rebuild her health. In 2022, she did this, and basically they would go to this camp for a week, and they would spend 4 hours a day hiking these trails. And she said her and her friend were not athletic people, and they struggled with their weight most of their life. She's like, we don't hike at all. And we decided, oh, this will be something fun. So her group of friends did that. And one was like a big hiker. So she was like off in the front of the group, like having the time of her life. And they were like dying, struggling in the back, like trying to get up the hill. And they were just like the whole time pretty much just talking, goofing off, and like just bearing through this like 4-hour hike. And another guy that was there was struggling too. And he like was not a hiker, but he was doing this as just something fun to do. And so the three of them really bonded and connected. And she said, we never talked about like what we do. And so we just were talking, having conversation casually, like maybe where we're from, or, you know, what brought us here, why we're here. And then never really like, and sometimes got deeper than that, like growing up, their childhood, like the things they've struggled with in life. And she's like, we really like connected on a deep level, but not like based off of where we are in our careers. And so later in the week, one of the last days, they were all sitting down eating dinner together. And somebody said, hey, what do you do? Talking to the guy. And he was kind of nervous. And she's like, he didn't really want to answer, but you could tell he was like questioning, should I say it? Well, he was the editor-in-chief of the British Vogue. And so she's like, man, I'm so glad I didn't know that at the beginning of the week, because the way I was dressing, like my mismatched clothes covered in mud, you would have been so embarrassed. And she's like, that led me to think, like, if we know things about people, do we show up as our authentic selves, or do we show up as something that we think they want? And so that was her whole point of like this story is, if I knew he was the editor-in-chief of British Vogue, would I have dressed the way I dressed? Would I have acted the way I acted? And she's like, but then we got to talk, and, you know, like, she has the background. She created It Cosmetics. She's the founder of it. She ran the business herself. She grew it herself. And then she eventually sold it. But she's like, you know, I could say the same thing to him. Like, if you knew who I was, would you have showed up differently? Would you have talked differently? And so it just goes back to, if we show up as ourselves, we make those so like close connections, and we gain the friendships that we actually need, not the ones that we want to have that aren't actually going to do anything for us. So on page 169, it says, the author asks some questions for us to sit and think about, to really dig into how are we showing up for people, and are we living authentically? So the first question, you can write these down, or you can listen to the recording later and just pause it, think about it, and kind of deep dive into it. Because as I was reading, I spent some time really thinking about these things myself, and I encourage you to do the same. But the first question she asks, do people know you for what you do, or know you for who you are? So like her hiking friend, he's the editor-in-chief of British Vogue. So do they know him because of that, or does she know him on a deeper connection, a deeper level? How are we showing up to people, and how are we being recognized by people? Is it for who we are or what we do, or is it because of what we truly are, and like our personalities? The second question, do you let what you do for a living cloud how you show up? So again, you know, if she knew that he was the editor-in-chief of Vogue, would she have dressed differently? So that's saying for us, like, would he have dressed differently because of his position, or do we show up because of the place we work, or whatever it is? Do you let what you do for a living cloud how you show up? The third question she asks, does your perception about others do for a living influence how worthy you feel of making a connection with them? So if you know somebody's the editor-in-chief of a magazine, are you going to show up differently, or are you going to show up as your true self? And if there's a connection, great. If not, you don't need that person in your close circle of friends. And then the fourth question, does the story you tell yourself about how you're just a, fill in the blank, whatever it is, just a stay-at-home mom, just a homeschool graduate, or whatever career level you're at, lead you to showing up differently and more timidly around others? It's easy to look at ourselves as in a position and say, oh, I'm just an elementary teacher. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. I'm just a whatever. And kind of downplay who we truly are, when really everyone's role and everyone's career, they're important and they matter. And so don't downplay that, and know that you're worthy of whatever position you have. And if you're right where God called you to be, then you're doing the exact right thing. It doesn't matter your title, your position, whatever. You are right where you're supposed to be. So then the fifth question, she ends with this last one. Does your past or beliefs of being too young, old, uneducated, shy, or whatever else interfere with how you present yourself? So what you think about yourself, things that happened to you, things that people said to you, whether it was to build you up or tear you down, does that... Sorry, Ezra's so loud. Hey, buddy, you want to take that out? You can play with the pillow, but take it out, okay? He's throwing the pillow around behind me on the floor. Does it interfere with how we present ourselves because we think we're too young, too old, uneducated, whatever? So then she ends with this quote: hiding part of or all of who you truly are creates a barrier of disconnection. And so her point is, don't show up not as yourself. It's okay to maybe feel different feelings, or like if you're going through something rough, maybe not show up as like the happiest version of yourself because you're struggling. And so it's okay to, we talked about that in a previous chapter. It's okay to have struggles and to face them, but don't live there. And so show up as all of who you are, whether it's, somebody who's hurting right now or somebody who's really happy because, you've realized that you're worthy of all the things coming to you, but always show up as your authentic self. So that was chapter 12. And then chapter 13, the title is The Lie, Labels Are Permanent. And she starts with this quote. It says, if speaking kindly to plants help them grow, imagine what speaking kindly to humans can do. So her point throughout this chapter is when somebody puts a label on us, something negative, something that hurts us personally, are we living in that label and applying it to ourselves and believing it, or are we reframing it and using it to say, I'm not that, and talking positive into ourselves? So this lady, when I was going through this book study for the first time, it was with a group of local ladies, and the lady leading it said that they had moved into their house. It was a new construction, and so they were planning to do the landscaping. They finally did this summer, and they planted some really nice plants right down her walkway out her front door. And she said, every time I would walk outside my front door, I would say, oh, look at you. You're growing so big. You're so beautiful. Oh, I just love it, like watching you grow. You're getting so full. Look at how tall you've gotten. And she's like, and I would speak love into these plants. And she's like, and I kid you not, my kids would follow behind me. And the plants, they would stand next to the same plants, and they would say, like making fun of it, like, oh, you're not a big plant. You're a little plant. Like, you're not going to grow. You're going to die. You don't get enough sun. And she's like, I kid you not, those plants are dying. She's like, but the rest of the ones down the walkway, they're thriving. And she's like, I can't tell you why that's happening, except this quote perfectly demonstrates that, is that if you speak kindly to them and they grow, imagine what you can do if you speak kindly to humans. And so I kind of thought it was funny. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons why her plants could have been dying. It doesn't necessarily have to be because her kids were talking negatively to them. But the illustration is just crazy how that actually happened. And she's like, so now I try to spend a little more time loving on them and, showing them some love to try and counteract what my kids were doing. But she says, on page 172, the labels you've let stick to you and that you believe about yourself impact your entire life. And if we live in those negative thoughts, it's easy for us to change our thoughts of ourselves and think we're not good enough for something because somebody else had that opinion. When really there's other people out there who are looking at us and saying, wow, I wish I could be more like that. Or look at how brave she is. Look how strong she is. Look how pretty she is. Whatever it is, there's other people who think that, but the people who have the negative thoughts are usually the ones who speak them the most, unfortunately. So she has a couple things throughout this chapter. And the first one is how the labels take roots. So on page 172, it says, everything in life is simply the meaning we attach to it, the story we tell ourselves about it, and how often the label we give it. And so she kind of gives some study behind it, and she says, our RAS, which is our reticular activating system, filters out 99% of stimuli surrounding us. So if we allow ourselves to focus on all of the negative things, then we're not allowing any of the good stuff to take root. And so our stimuli gets filtered out. So she gives the example like, okay, when you're reading this book, there's 100 other things going on around you, whether it's your kids talking or the dishwasher going or the sink running or whatever it is. There's 100 other things going on around you, yet you have the ability to focus on the words of the book. And so she said the same thing happens when somebody puts a label on us. We focus on that one label, and while other good things could be filtering in, or we could be hearing other things, we're not paying attention to them. We're kind of blocking them out and only focusing on that negative thing. So she says, when you let a label take root and believe it, your RAS reinforces that belief by finding proof all around you and highlighting it. So she gives the example like, if somebody says you're not smart, then she says, every time I make a mistake, that heightens like that mistake. And it's like, wow, that person was right. I made a mistake. I'm not smart. I'm not good enough because look at all these mistakes I'm making. But the same thing happens if you switch it and say, okay, this person said I'm not smart, but you start telling yourself, I am smart. And you speak that affirmation to yourself, I am smart. Every time you do something that's really smart, you're going to notice it and you're going to be like, wow, I really am smart. And you're going to start training your brain to look for the positive. So the second thing is the power of labels. On page 173, she says, labels are powerful, and when we believe the empowering ones, they can help us positively shape our identity and self-worth. So the author's friend, Ed, who was the British editor-in-chief of Vogue, had a daily routine that he did with his children. So he instilled in his children at a young age, telling them all the positive things about themselves. And so he would look them in the eye like one time a day or a couple times a day, and he'd say, let me tell you about you. And he would pour positive, empowering thoughts into them and affirmations. And it could be things like, you are so smart, let me tell you about you. You're so beautiful. You're so kind. You're so friendly. Things like that. But he would speak them directly to his children. And so as he was raising them, he was speaking all of these truths into them and hoping to build their self-esteem. So that way, as they got older and people started speaking negative things to them, they already had those labels pushed out of their thought, and they were focusing on the things that he's been instilling in them for years. And so his daughter goes off to college, and he didn't know this, but she had told her roommates and her friends at college that, before they'd leave for school, he'd say all of these positive affirmations to them. And so when he was there visiting, he said bye, he, gave her a hug, kiss, whatever, he walked out. And her friends go, hey, wait, aren't you going to tell her about her? Like, aren't you going to give her those positive affirmations that you always did growing up? And he's like, in that moment, I realized that these were so special. Even when she rolled her eyes, even when she shrugged them off, even when she laughed at them, she actually really appreciated these kind words that I was speaking into her. And even as a college student, she still needed to hear them. She still needed to know how worthy and how loved she was, even by her dad, who, embarrassingly kissed her or hugged her in her dorm room or whatever it was in front of her friends. Number 3, disempowering labels. We often let disempowering labels take root and stick for decades. On page 175, she says, disempowering labels have the power to make us disappear and feel unworthy. She continues on page 176, these labels are not only a lie, but they're also not permanent. They're like a Post-it note that may get stuck, but they're removable. Maybe today is the day you're going to decide to peel off those old labels that are holding you back and keeping you from hiding and living life to the fullest and highest expression of who you truly are. And so she's saying when somebody speaks something negative to us, when somebody's unkind to us, when somebody makes us feel a certain way, think of it like a Post-it note. If somebody says, you're not smart, well, don't believe that in yourself. Start to speak that positive affirmation. Yes, I am smart. I am smart. I am smart. And keep speaking that. And think of that Post-it note. Just peel it off. Every time you think of those negative things you were told, just peel off those that negative thought and replace it with something positive. And then number 4, she says, is new labels. So page 177, the author does an exercise, and so it looks like this. I don't know if you can see that, but it's basically a grid. And in the first box, she says to either put this grid on a computer, do an Excel sheet, draw it on a sheet of paper. But in the first box, write disempowering labels. Then in the second box, you're going to put what has believing this label cost you, and what impact had it had on every area of your life. And so this is something, an activity, once this video is done, you go back, rewatch it, you make this, and you really sit and dwell and get alone with your thoughts, even though it's uncomfortable sometimes because we're bringing up negative things that were spoken to us. But it's going to help to boost you so in the future you don't have those negative thoughts. And so this is part of the work that you have to do. And then the last box, it says new empowering replacement labels and beliefs. So you're going to create those 3 boxes. Just make a little grid. I think she has a resource too that you might be able to print it. Yeah, so you can also print it out at worthybook.com/resources. So if you don't want to draw it out and you want to hop on there, you can go ahead and print it out and she'll have that for you. And then you can just sit and read it all and fill in the blanks yourself. But so she says the first box you're going to write disempowering label in there. And then she says, so basically any negative thing that somebody has stuck on you that doesn't really align with who you believe you truly are. And then the second one, what has the label cost you? And what impact has it had on everyone in your life or every area of your life? So she said things like relationships, jobs, ambitions, and your joy even, your peace, your belonging. What has it cost you on the surface level and beyond? So really think about that. Like on the surface level, if somebody says you're not smart, maybe you try to hide that you are smart. You don't share your ideas because you don't want other people to think it's a dumb idea. And the next one is you're replacing. So you're replacing that disempowering belief with something new. And so she says that this is where you create a new label for yourself. And you tell yourself, you know what, maybe somebody said I'm not smart. So you're going to replace it with I am brilliant. Not just I'm smart, I'm brilliant. Or, I'm a genius. Whatever it is, replace it and believe what you are putting there. And then keep reminding yourself of that positive label as you continue on hearing those negative things, because unfortunately they're always going to be there. And so we have to learn to retrain our brain to remember the positive, not the negative. She even says for, something that is a positive belief, she says, even think of it as what would my creator say about me? Because he knows my soul. What would he say about me? And believe that for yourself. So if our creator would tell us that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, and somebody says you're ugly, then replace that thought and say, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I am made in God's image. He loves me just as I am, and believe that truth. So page 180, she says, we can't just ignore and bury the deep stories we tell ourselves about our identity around worthiness because they'll keep showing up. When we acknowledge them, they start to lose their power. And so, yes, it's uncomfortable to think through all of the negative things people have said about us in life, but it's so important for us to believe how worthy and beautifully we are made in God's image, to acknowledge them and then train our brain to think differently and to put those new labels on, because that's going to help us grow and we're going to start believing those things and not the negative things that come into our lives. So the last one, number 5, is thought reframing. So she says on page 180, one theory says we have 17 seconds to intercept a negative thought and replace it with a positive one before it takes root. So practice catching and reframing negative thoughts daily. So whenever you hear something, just practice reframing it. Kind of take a deep breath. Somebody says something negative, start speaking affirmations to yourself I am powerful, I am beautiful, I am strong, I am successful, whatever it is. Say those things when you hear something negative and stop it right there. Because if you let it get past 17 seconds, you're allowing yourself to let them take root in your life. On page 181, it says practice writing your new empowering labels in your gratitude journal or on sticky notes for you to look at daily. I posted a reel yesterday. I had written affirmations. And so I had some on my mirror, and my husband kept saying wow, look at you, writing these affirmations out. He's I really need to do that. I feel that would help with my mindset shift and with when things are stressful at work. And so yesterday I just sat down and I wrote some for him. And I Googled like affirmations for successful men. And I took some, I twisted them a little bit to make them fit our lifestyle a little bit more. And I hung them on his mirror. But it's so true. Like if we see those affirmations, we're going to speak them to ourselves and we're going to start believing them. So page 182, and this is the final thought that I have. It's visible reminders can make a powerful difference in achieving your goals. You are the author of your own identity. You are the main character in the story of your life, and the character description is up to you, no one else. So we get to choose exactly who we want to be. We get to allow God to place dreams and desires and passions in our heart that we can fulfill, even if everybody else thinks we're completely insane. Because believe me when I say, Nathan and I have had our family thinking we were insane for a lot of different things. But you know what? We stay true to who we are. We follow God's leading and we continue to do that. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. So that's the final thought that I have. Next week, I'm going to try and do 14 and 15 together. Chapter 15 is long, chapter 14 is short, so we'll see how many notes I get. But if you haven't gotten this book, Worthy by Jamir Kern Lima, I'm sure if you just put like Worthy book study or Worthy book in Google, it'll probably pop up. But so that's the end of chapter, 13 and 12. And so next week we'll try and do 14 and 15, and then we'll have just a couple more chapters, like 9 chapters left of this book. So thank you for joining. I hope this was encouraging to you. If you've missed any of the other ones, I upload them all on YouTube, so you can just search my little Instagram handle, see all the other videos on YouTube. But I hope you guys have a great Wednesday, and I'm going to go get Ezra down for a nap now. Have a great day.